from your left to right on this panel, Jesse Williams, Marko Knezic, and Dennis Hill. If you would each like to give a short 2-sentence introduction of yourselves, you may do so.
My name is Jesse Williams. I'm a software engineer, currently building a turnkey DAO solution that acts as a peer-to-peer lending protocol that allows users to leverage their cryptocurrency assets in order to receive stablecoins.
Hello, everybody. My name is Marko Knezic. I am a marketing lead at the HBAR Foundation. HBAR Foundation is a global organization with a $2.5 billion mandate to foster growth and usage on the Hedera network. For anyone not familiar, Hedera is the 30th ranked cryptocurrency by market cap with a current market cap of $3 billion. And as it relates to real estate, probably our biggest builder on the chain right now is a company called Red Swan, who has already tokenized $5 billion worth of real estate assets on the Hedera network, and break it all down so it makes sense as we go on here.
I'm Dennis Hill. I've been a resident of the area since 1978. Started one of the first computer engineering programs in the country at MSO University back in the 80s. I've been working in the areas of data security and blockchain NFT for the last 20 years so. And I head up 2 international organizations involved in decentralization of HR information and globalization of the workforce, as well as the application of non-fungible and fungible tokens in a variety of vertical industries, including real estate. It's a pleasure to be here today. Thanks, Mike.
So let's start with a high-level overview. AI and blockchain actually complement each other quite well, because where AI is about data going in, some automation happening, and information coming out, blockchain in many cases is about providing provenance of that data. In other words, looking at the origin, the transaction, and the current state of data. So how do we see blockchain across industries increasing transparency and trust? Actually, an interesting phrase is replacing trust with truth, when we know that because it's on an immutable ledger, something that can't be manipulated, that the information there is actual truth. How are we seeing this benefiting industries?
So taking a step back just to kind of consider the current context of everything, a lot of people are losing trust in the institutions that we've come to rely on for social interaction, for banking and finance, for like our political registry systems. That trust has been eroded. And when trust is gone, it can be next to impossible to get back. Most people aren't going to forget that they had their finances, the ability to access their finances removed from them because of something, some politicized situation, or they had their ability to express their voice removed from them because of some, political pressure experienced by the company that's facilitating these things. And so how do we see blockchain coming into play specifically as it relates to AI? AI has one of the lesser desired effects of increasing the ability for a small group of people to abuse their influence over a large group of people. With the introduction of AI, there's the possibility of dictatorships are inherently unstable because so few people exerting force over so many people. There's only a matter of time before it all falls apart. Well, with AI coming into play, stable dictatorships that may be possible. And so what blockchain does is it allows us to audit the people who are implementing these policies. It allows us to keep them honest so that we can ensure that our freedoms and liberties and autonomy and sovereignty isn't being violated in the pursuit of maximizing our addiction to whatever product this AI is being implemented within. So with that, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, so breaking down a lot of these topics, blockchain, AI, anything technical, right? It can be very tough to understand. So I like to think of things, when we think about the trustless nature of the blockchain, right? Like it sound like a really complicated thing. But the way I would think about it is like, there's a guy back there running a Packer show, right? I've never met that person before, but if we went to a bar to watch a Packer game, and I said, let's bet $5 on the game. And he said, I bet the Packers win, and I said, I bet the Bears win. And there's no way I can guarantee if I win that bet that he's going to pay me, right? Very simple example, but as you extrapolate that, blockchain removes that need for trust. I don't need to know him because we both agree and put into a code that says automatically whoever wins, the money gets put into whoever's account afterwards, right? So that is just one quick example of how blockchain and this technology removes all these extraneous challenges to doing business with people, to commerce. And you can extrapolate that now by doing business with anybody across the world, buying or selling any asset or anything like that. So yeah, I think in most simplest terms, that's kind of how I think about the benefits of blockchain. And then you can really apply that to any industry that deals with cash flows moving in and out and asset exchanges and that sort of thing.
Thanks, Marko. So let me do a little bit higher level point of view here. Disruption is driven these days through technology, mostly, some policy, some personality. Blockchain is, as you've already heard, kind of in that category with other technology verticals such as AI. But what I don't think people realize quite yet is how disruptive all of these emerging technologies are going to be. It's similar to what we saw in the PC revolution 40 years ago. It took about 35 years from the invention of the transistor to lead to the PCs that ultimately led to the networks and finally what we have today as a Web 2 model. What blockchain, embedded AI, which the previous panel talked about, are going to do is that they're forcing a complete inversion of the computing model that we have come to rest on and that we recognize every day in articles in the newspaper and on TV. Centralization, centralized databases, your records maintained at the hospital, by the hospital, on the hospital system. Your records maintained by Amazon on their base of servers, your records maintained at the universities. These are all centralized systems that have evolved over the last 60 years that is now going to be turned on its head. The basis of blockchain and the promises it offers is decentralization. Let me give you an example, just a show of hands. All right, I usually do karaoke, but I'm going to ask you to get involved with this audience participation. All right, how many of you actually understand blockchain? All right, look at the chairs in front of you. Consider each chair a block. And yet this is an amphitheater. So this could be a real estate contract. And instead of the real estate contract being stored as a single file at the Register of Deeds, it's torn up into a whole bunch of components that look like these seats. But these seats are still stored in one amphitheater. Well, each of those blocks assembled in here still make up the amphitheater. Now, what if I take each seat and I move each one individually at different parts around the city of Milwaukee? I haven't eliminated the seats. they're still there. And if I define the seats as I have with some way of relating one next to the other, next to the other, next to the other, so I can reassemble those seats, I can reconstruct my real estate contract. So blockchain is like taking our contract, which is this amphitheater, and breaking it apart into the individual seats and transplanting those seats all over the city. And having the ability then to recapture those and reconstitute that contract on demand. That's blockchain. Now that's simple blockchain. It's a picture of blockchain. But what's really beautiful about blockchain is that that seat is encrypted in such a way that the only way you can decrypt it is 1 in 15 trillion. Now do that for each one of those seats. How likely is it you're going to be able to decrypt all of the seats in here by a hacker and reassemble that contract? Anybody want to guess? Right? It's a permutation of the 1 in 15 trillion. I sound like a professor again. But this is what I find. Everybody talks about blockchain as if it's some sort of entity out there. It's a process. And when you start talking about storing data in a decentralized mode like that, now you understand why blockchain is so cool. I could take up 20 minutes on this. But what I want to do is just help you understand. I want to see more hands shown the next time you're asked, do you understand blockchain? Because that's all it is. And now you know why things like the recent Ascension ransomware issue and why centralized computing systems are going away. And this is my point. Blockchain and other technologies like AI are going to flip that data model of centralization completely on its head. And when we talk about things like democratization, which is part of this, and your ability to own real estate without buying the whole kit and caboodle, but having a fractional share of it, like owning one of those chairs and being part owner of this theater, you can imagine that that's going to change the way we do computing. And now, all those guys that were talking up here earlier about building software, and my friend here who built software, y'all are going to have to rewrite everything from scratch. Because what Web3 and blockchain and embedded AI requires is a completely rewritten basis of code, because the architecture for the first time is in the software. It's not in the hardware. Watching their heads up here, see? That's my Bernie crew. Which means what? We're not going to be able to patch our way to it. Now I'm talking Web3. We're not going to be able to patch our way to a new register of deeds to handle real estate contracts. We're not going to be able to add software to their Oracle financial system today or their Microsoft system tomorrow, like we get patches every day on our phones or patches on our workstations. You can't patch your way to it. It requires a complete redesign from scratch. That's what we're looking at here in your lifetime. How many understand blockchain? There we go. That's good. That's more than what first said. Thank you. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, guys.
One thing that you mentioned was Web3. Kind of snuck it in there, but we could imagine that that's what we're working towards. This decentralized internet, in a sense. How do we want to define Web3? What is it going to look like for the people here in the audience? How do their lives change? What are the new value propositions being brought to them? Why should they get involved? How is it different than Web 2? What is Web 2? What is the internet now, and what is it changing into?
Good question. So Web 2 is, I would define it as internet architecture in which the custodians of the data itself and the software and these digital institutions that we all use and eventually come to rely on. The custodians are centralized entities. So a single company or a small subset of people who have shared collective interests among themselves, and that shared collective interest may come contrary to what their users' interests are. And sometimes that manifests in different perverted business models. So that would be my description of Web 2. Now, thus far, we've used and implemented Web 2 to the extent that we have, because we haven't had any other option. And so when we get upset with the way that a particular company is managing the digital product that we've come to rely on in order to earn our livelihoods, we kind of just got to sit, grin and bear it in Web 2. Web 3, on the other hand, is a paradigm shift in that the custodians of the data itself is not some single entity or bank or institution. So instead of that being the case, in Web 3, the custodians of the data are the users of the data themselves and the random people around the world who wish to see these Web 3 institutions flourish and contribute to them by providing computational power to uphold these systems. And so to give an anecdote to kind of like to further, enumerate my point, Amazon Web Services is an example of a Web 2 institution. When Amazon Web Services, developers like myself, when we code, we don't really have to worry about the servers and hard drives and stuff where our data is put. That's not really what software engineers focus on. That's more so the role of an IT specialist. Amazon Web Services came into play and began servicing different developers who would have otherwise had to become software engineers and IT specialists in order to run their own servers. So what Amazon Web Services does is they offer these servers. They say, hey, you engineers out there, if you focus just on coding, when you have a place where you need to store your code so that it can actually, exist on the internet and users can actually use this digital product that you've created, deploy it to our servers. We'll put together, an easy software developer kit that allows you to just focus on coding. And when you're ready to deploy it to the internet, you press a few buttons and poof, it's on the internet. Now, back in 2009 or 10, whenever Amazon Web Services came online, back when that happened, that was the only choice that developers had in order to explore digital business models. And so that's what developers, went with. Now, fast forward to a day and age where there are alternatives to that structure. Instead of Amazon Web Services being the custodians of those servers and consequently the custodians of the data that is stored on those servers that many people rely on for their livelihood and or convenience or means to communication. Instead of it being all relegated to the custodianship of Amazon Web Services, different people from all over the world, small, family-run operations, single individuals can choose to say, hey, rather than us, rather than you all being forced to go to AWS, we'll provide computational power. And one person could be in Chile, one person could be in, New Zealand, one person can be, anywhere in the world. We'll provide that computational power. You don't have to trust us. Everything is open source. All of the infrastructure that you all are relying upon is open source and you can audit it. And we all are, as the new custodians of the data, the decentralized custodians of the data, you can be assured that we won't act or behave in a way that is nefarious because there is a consensus protocol that incentivizes us not to do so. So that's kind of the difference between Web 2 and Web 3. If I had to sum it up really quickly, Web 2, all of the custodians of the data are small groups of people or companies and organizations, and we're beholden to them. They can now take our data and use it to train AI models and use it, in ways that we don't necessarily agree with. That's Web 2. Web 3, different people from all around the world are constantly they become the custodians. They're constantly being audited and checked as to assure that they are not acting in any way that's nefarious.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm a non-technical person, so I'm going to take it all the way back and just do some examples that really help me think about this. So when I think about the simplest terms of a blockchain, which Web3, I'll get to the association here in a second, but like if I wrote my name on a piece of paper or any information, so I'm going to say my name, and I said, my name is Marko, and I just kept it to myself on one piece of paper, and then I lose it, how does anyone else know that my name is Marko? But if I write it down and give it to all of you, now we have a chain of information. So there's not like one single point of failure. So now we've created like a network, right? Like a blockchain network. So now if we look at how that affects the way current Web 2 things, so the Web 2 is like the read-write internet. So think about social media, right? You can post something and it goes out for everyone to see. So that people can read it, you can write it, and that's all. When you think about Web 3, think about it as like the read-write own version of the internet. So instead of everything, in my name example, me holding the information and data, like hypothetically, let's say like Facebook does, right? Everything's on a Facebook server. They own that data, they control it, all that stuff. Now, in this decentralized model, for example, on Hedera, we have a social media platform called Galaxy. And what you can do is not only can you read and write, but I can automatically mint an NFT of picture, art I made, a song I made, post it. But the difference is instead of Facebook owning it or whoever the single party is, I do. So I can sell it to anyone else on that network immediately. I can do whatever I want with it, but it just creates now a new level of autonomy of what I do with my IP, my brain, my thoughts. And it creates an economy that I can sell these things. And everyone who's connected to my network can operate that way as well. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. So anytime someone says Web3, it's just any platform like that that's built in this way where the individuals who make up the network own the data and their content. And when you talk about Web2, it's a centralized entity, a Google, Facebook, anybody owns and controls the data, which, by the way, they make billions of dollars on every year, even your personal data that they sell to other people. And in Web3, you can choose whether you want to sell that and monetize personal data like that if you want to be on lists or whatever. It's just like one example of ways you can tokenize and monetize your personal property in a digital format.
Not sure how I should follow that. How about two broad statements? One is that these technologies have taken us back to the lawless days of the Wild West. AI and blockchain are disruptive technologies that we do not have very clear laws on in this country or regulation. Even the Department of Treasury, most of you know that through the three-letter IRS, are interpreting existing laws, just like 40 years ago, we interpreted computer hacking with PCs and modems through the view of telecommunication laws that govern telephones since the 1940s. We're in that same state today. The law lags behind technology. We're not there yet. And a lot of what we're talking about in terms of the tokenization of financial transactions, some of you might have played around a little bit with cryptocurrency. That's really not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the tokenization of real assets In other words, if you all wanted ownership in this amphitheater, we basically sell you a fraction of it through these chairs. Now, there's a lot of lingo. There's a whole glossary out here that people are going to learn if they really are interested in it. And frankly, I don't know how you're going to avoid it because these technologies are going to touch everybody in this area, this room. Everybody already has started. But that idea that we lack the security management of this, not just data security, I'm talking about the asset securities, the way the IRS views us, Department of Justice and so forth, is a problem. Because in the United States, we have yet to make a very clear definition that you own your data. It's a real basic question, isn't it? All that information that's stored in the bank, on the e-commerce systems and everywhere else, that those people are very clearly defined in other countries as data gatherers. You are seen as the data owners, but not in the United States. It's still very murky, it's undefined, and until that happens, everything else will be managed for you, which is what will keep this development of tokenization really impeded. That has to be defined. For a good reference on this, I'd recommend you take a look at the World Economic Forum's program called the Presidio Principles. Whether you agree on everything that the World Economic Forum puts out there or not, they are leading the charge in terms of global recognition of the impact of decentralization towards increasing democratization. That's what this is about. That's what my colleagues here have been discussing. The fact that you can't own a piece of property today, you wouldn't, I think a lot of people were asked a question recently, if you could buy your home today under these conditions, one, could you afford it at the current price? And what has happened in the rental markets? What's happened in the low income and affordable housing markets? So ownership now becomes an opportunity for people when we tokenize real estate, because now you can just buy a portion of it and build a portfolio over time and literally build a mechanism towards greater individual wealth. So I have to say that, keeping in line with the real estate aspect, it's real estate. Even though it'll have a digital twin in the ether, whatever we decide to call that in Web3, the reality is that people who have not been able to have access to markets do have or will have access to these markets. I hope that draws it all around for you, because I think that's...
Yeah, I think tokenization could have its own 25-minute conversation just to touch on, the ownership of assets. One way that we could look at this is the cash in your wallets. When cash is in your wallets, it's in your possession. You have control over it. When you put the cash in the bank, it's not your money anymore. There is a financial institution in charge of it. But then it begs the question, how do you digitize your cash without the financial institution being in charge of it? And the answer is Web3. There's a creation, we'll call it, of a Web3 wallet, which is this idea that we can digitize a currency or any sort of asset. I could have $5 right next to my piece of real estate in this digital realm, but I have full possession of it. No one is handling it except me. It's mine. And that's unprecedented. Aside from actual tangible cash, that's the best example. But in a digital world, it has not been deeply explored. And so knowing that we could have true sovereignty of our financial assets should be empowering. That's how we should perceive it. This push towards democratization and the ability to move assets around, cash, real estate, yield-bearing currencies, and to really profit from it. We should all be looking forward to that. So, in the final 60 seconds, are there anything we'd like to touch on from tokens or contract? Well, that's its own 25-minute conversation, so don't. But high-level ideas, what do people need to know?
So, I just want to mention something in relation to what you were saying. This return to us having true custody of our money, that's not a new concept. That's the way human economies have run pretty much all the way up until this recent digital age. So we shouldn't feel like we're receiving some privilege. We should feel a sense of entitlement to this because we are entitled to hold custody of our own money, our own information, and our own digital assets. So I just wanted to add to that.
Yeah, and I would just say, when you hear about these topics and you're trying to learn about them, like, don't be intimidated by words like real world asset tokenization, blockchain, this and that, smart contracts. There's, to your point, like the idea of tokenization has been around forever. Think about, you go to Pavilion, you give them $5, right? They give you a token. Like, just think about it, really easy terms like that to understand. And then you have to start to understand more how these industries affected, how you can benefit, how you can innovate, how you can own. And yeah, from real estate to currency, like whatever you want, there's probably something out there being tokenized, and learn about what that means individually. So like in real estate, like you said, it's art or something that you buying fractional ownership of something you couldn't afford otherwise, getting liquidity by fractionalizing something you own and selling it to people without having to pay fees to a third party. So there's a lot of benefits to all this stuff, and it can all be applied, but I would say just go into it with an open mind and try to understand the basics, and it takes away a lot of the intimidation and apprehension that you're on the tech.
I have nothing more to add. You guys did a great job.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, you three, for joining me on stage for the blockchain discussion. A round of applause for our blockchain experts.